All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to High School Youth Group. And tonight we have our Q&A panel, which is why things are going to be a little bit different. As you notice, there's 4 people up here, and we have a couple others coming as well over the course of the evening. And so what we're going to do here is, you all have your notes page, right? You should all get your notes pages. Sorry, there's notes. Come on, small group leaders. Oh, man. Also, students can grab them, you know, Jenna. Like, they're old enough to be able to get their own. What? I'm so sorry. That's my bad. I only said it once, so that's my fault. I should know better than that. I know, there was a lot going on. All right, so there is a notes page. You're going to notice that it's totally blank on the inside. That's just for you to write if you want to take any notes. But the important piece is the front page. So the front page has a number there, so you can actually hold on to your cell phone today, and that's a little different than normal. The up on the screen as well has a number. Whoa. All right, Aiden. Whoo. But on the screen, there's a number that you can text as well. It is a Google Voice number to which I created today, and so it does, it's totally anonymous. It doesn't have anybody's phone number in it. It doesn't even have my phone number in it if you want to see it. It just has phone numbers. It doesn't have any names or anything like that. So, yes, so that is that. So it's an anonymous texting thing. But if you text and you want your name to be known, then you would just have to say your name in the text message, if that makes sense. Because if we don't get to your question, then you could follow up after and be like, hey, my question wasn't answered, and I am still curious, and I would love to know what an answer is to this. Sound good? Excellent. All right, cool. Are you guys ready to start? All right, we're going to start with an introduction. So you guys know Jenna and Ainsley already, and you may know the other two, but you may not yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Ainsley and work our way back this way. And give us, if you would, your name and what all information do we want to know? Name and relationship status? That would be helpful, yeah?
It's complicated, Ben, okay?
I mean, because we're here to talk about these sorts of things, and it'll come up in our conversation anyway. It's up to you to whatever you want to call anything. That's up to you, how you want to respond to that. But what other information would be beneficial? Maybe your age? Whoa. Yeah, that would be, kids and stuff would be, included in relationship status. Yeah, we'll call that included. So we'll say family makeup, family breakdown, something like that. So it doesn't have to be, I don't know, relationship status. You just tell us your name, and whatever comes out after that. Sound good?
Okay.
All right.
Hi. Oh. Okay, hi, I'm Ainsley. I feel like I'm doing a Facebook profile, relationship
Yes.
status. I am dating in a relationship of 7 months. And family breakdown, I have a dog, Milo. He's 5.
I'm Jenna. I am divorced. I have 4 kids. So I was married, now single, which is, I think, unique. And yeah. My kids are 10, 8, 7, 5, and I also have a dog. So.
I'm Bryson. I'll be the new guy, but I did get the matching wear pink today with the rest of the group.
This is actually how we recruit new leaders.
Yeah, they just throw a shirt on you. They find it in Sam's back seat. When you say show up. So I'm Bryson. I grew up going to this church. Tom was my small group leader back in the day.
I'm old, yes.
I, too, was married. I am divorced for a few years now, 30 years old, if we want to disclose that. I do not have any family, no kids. I don't even have a goldfish, so I know it's sad.
My name is Tom Pyle. Most of you probably know me or my wife, Janine. I've been married almost 15 years. We have 2 kids, Micah and Allie, good friends of the Hannum kiddos, best friends, I'd say. We have 2 goldfish, actually, but they're 4 years old, and they're still growing. They're growing big and strong, yes.
That's impressive. All right, so As we mentioned, at any point in time, you're welcome to text in any questions that you may have, or if you want to live ask a question, you just have to raise your hand and say it. And but beyond that, I have questions that have been submitted here, so I'm just going to start working through these questions. Sound good? If you have a live question, just interrupt me, and that is totally fine. So we're going to start big, and just say, hey, does sexual temptation ever get easier?
I think it changes, just depending on your, like, where God has you. I don't know that it ever gets easier. I think that would be a lie. But I think it changes over time. And to think that, like, oh, as I grow up, it's going to get easier would maybe set yourself up for failure. I do think in times, like I think in marriage, sexual temptation looks different than when you're single. And so I wouldn't say that it gets easier. I do think it changes. I think there's unique parts of being a teenager with like just puberty and hormones changing that can make that unique, but also, like, I hate to break it to you, like, hormones change throughout life too. And so there's going to be other life phases where those hormones might make changes more difficult. So that would be my answer.
And I will interject real quick just for the panel. I guess we didn't really talk about this ahead of time, but you do not have to answer every question. So if there's a question that's asked and you're just like, nope, I'm not going to answer that one. It would be great if somebody answered every question, but not everybody has to answer every question. So we'll just lay that ground rule.
Yeah, I'll say pretty similarly. It probably gets a bit easier, at least for me. Once I got married, I was like, okay, there are things I'm able to do now that I wasn't able to do. And so I have someone who's committed to me, that I'm committed to her. And so now we can talk about things. We can figure out what kind of things we want to do together and all that kind of stuff, and what boundaries we may have. But before then, I grew up in a Christian church, very, very strict. And so there was y'all are too young, but the silver ring thing and the big push for purity and what else was it called? True Love Waits and I Kissed Dating Goodbye. Those are huge books when I was like middle school, high school, and it was a lot of pressure. Like the most important thing you can do is save your virginity, and so there was so much pressure on that, particularly for women, my female friends, that it was just like this big fear thing. I can't do this thing. And so it probably gets a bit easier, but I would say the biggest thing is what your expectations are, and what you're doing and why you're doing it. If it's because you want to have this fun feeling and pleasure for yourself, that selfishness probably won't go away. So if it's an intimacy connection between two people that are committed to each other for a lifetime, I think that helps for sure.
Yeah, I would have to agree with both of them about how my temptations in high school is different than it is now, and it's going to be different in 20 years from now and then another 20 years because we grow and change as people. But that can seem kind of like gloomy, like, oh no, so I'm always going to struggle with sexual temptation. It's always going to be really, really hard. But I also believe in God refining us, and the Holy Spirit, the longer it lives within you, the more it refines you and the more strength you have in the Spirit. So I will say that I can tap into the Holy Spirit's strength easier now than I did when I was 15. When I was 16, and I know when I'm 40, 50, 60 years old, it'll be easier to use the Holy Spirit because I've created this habit out of using His strength. So even though my temptations are going to change and they're still going to be there and they're going to evolve with who I am or who I am with, and I'm still going to struggle with it, the way that I defeat them or with the Holy Spirit is going to be easier. And I know that that's been easier for me, as asking God for help in those temptations has become easier for me. So the temptation is still there, but how I ask for help has become easier.
Can we zoom in on that? Because the next question has exactly to do with, like, when temptation comes, the question is, how do we actually rely on God through temptation? Because that is something that, like, we ought to do, but how do we actually practically do that?
Yeah, I would add to what they've said in the previous question in that it doesn't necessarily get easier, but you can put practices in place to help you avoid that temptation and, really stepping up your spiritual life and relying on God in those times. So different forms of accountability. If you are in a marriage, having those conversations frequently. Don't just assume expectations and the expectations you have for yourself, don't put those on someone else, right? Even if you're just dating or getting to know someone, you can be very clear about it. But I think you can put practices in place, specifically, who are you talking to about that? It should not probably be your intimate partner, unless, again, you're married. So I would just echo everything else that they said. I'm trying to think of a, off the top of my head, very, very tangible one. You got something?
Yeah, I do. I think we know ourselves pretty well usually, and so start to note when are these temptations happening? Is there a pattern to it? Is it at night? Is it oh well, when I watch this type of movie, or man, I can't handle this type of book. Know what your limits are as far as what you can take in. But also if you realize wow, there's patterns to when I face temptation, then start to put some practical things in place, whether it's I'm going to make sure that I have this type of accountability, or talk to a friend and say hey, I'm struggling here, I want you to check in with me weekly and hold me accountable on this. Exercise is a great way to release endorphins and make sure that you're staying healthy in that way, and that can help with temptations too. Just practical healthy things. And if you're in a position where you're I'm facing temptation, change your behavior. What are you doing right then? Are you sitting in bed watching TV? Get up and exercise, or get up and call a friend. Just change your behavior right away. And some of that can just help as well. And recognizing okay, I'm facing a temptation right now, and I need to change what it is. The other thing I would say is just thinking through, what is the temptation rooted in? Are you longing for some type of intimacy in that moment? Is it what is it that is the root of your temptation? And we've talked about this a lot. When we long for something, there's always a root cause of it. So is there something that's not being fulfilled that you can ask a friend and be hey, I'd really love to go out for coffee this week. I need some friend time. So just trying to figure out is there something that's at the root of that temptation too that could help as well.
All right. How do you know if wanting to show affection physically is out of love or lust? And when I ask this, I don't necessarily even mean sex, even a kiss or something, Just reading it word for word.
I do know, Ben. Yeah, that's
good.
really good.
Good. Yes.
I think, kind of like I said before, I think the reason behind it, I think a lot of times love and lust is a lot of times self-focused. I want to feel good in this moment, physically or emotionally, whatever it may be. And love can have pieces of that for sure, but it's also, I want to show my love for this other person. And if they have this boundary, my love says, I'm not going to even ask if I can cross that boundary. I'm not going to bring that boundary up. I know it's a boundary for them or for me, so I'm not going to say, hey, let's see how far we can push it. I'm going to say, respect. No, I'm not going to get close to that boundary for you. I think that's showing love to someone. And that person's if you had that conversation, I would say if you are dating someone, have that conversation for sure, if you haven't yet. But yeah, I think that the heart behind it, are you trying to feel good in this moment for yourself? Are you trying to lift up and respect the other person? If they're not comfortable, all those kinds of things come into it, and you can read the situation and what's your heart and motivation behind whatever you're doing.
Lust takes, love gives, I think is a good way to look at it too, just like what Tom was saying.
Yeah, I feel like it's less about the action and more about the motive behind it, because you can have a married couple who's having sex and it's lustful versus, a married couple and then they're having sex and it's loving, and it's less about the action of what you're doing and more of what's my motive and my heart behind why I'm doing this. Why do I like what you just had to say about lust is and you can even taking out physical stuff of just you're going on dates with them, or you're communicating, or how you talk to your partner. It's you can be lustful or trying to get something out of them, but love, we're always sacrificing. It's sacrificing myself and being sacrificial and giving towards my partner or friend or whatever. So it's really about where's your mindset and your heart whenever you're approaching those things.
quick practical thing that I learned a few years ago. Check your heart rate, like your actual pulse. If you're in that like temptation, that lustful state, your heart rate does elevate. You're trying to process, is this good for me, is this bad? So generally your heart rate is higher than what it would be if you were sacrificially giving in a loving situation, saying, hey, I care about this person. You know, yeah, it'd be cool to kiss them or do whatever, but I'm gonna reserve that. Your heart rate's a really good indicator of if that's lust or love.
So, what if you feel ready? What should you do if you feel ready to open your temple body to your significant other? Whether it's lust or love, it doesn't matter, but you just feel ready. What do you do with that?
Are you married in this situation?
No, but I feel ready.
You're not ready.
Oh, okay. How can you say that, Tom?
I'm wiser and smarter now. I would say, well, you've probably heard your prefrontal cortex doesn't develop until you're like 27 now. So you have kind of Neanderthal brains at this point. And really, it's harder to think through, process through emotions and feelings. And I don't know the percentages of people who date in high school who stay with that person forever, but it's pretty low. Honestly, the hardest part for me in sexual temptation was when I was engaged. I was 2 months out from my wedding. I was like, oh, I know I'm going to be married to her, so who cares? Let's just do this now. And that was the most tempting time for me. It was like, I know the plan, in 2 months I'm getting married. Who cares what happens at this point? And that was, for me, I was pushing about it. I was like, let's just, who cares? Let's just keep doing, go further and further. And so that was a gut check for me. Like, man, this is so selfish. And this is something that yes, I love this person, but I don't know her that well yet. I've been dating for a couple years. I've been married for 15 years. There's still things I'm learning about my wife. So if you feel you're ready, but there's not a ring on your finger, and a marriage ring, not an engagement ring, you're not ready yet.
I might jump in here. I feel, because I read this question and I was thinking about it all day. And I was like, okay, like, how do I approach this? If you are in a relationship with someone and you love them and you care for them, you think they're hot, you're into them, it's totally okay you want to have sex with them. We are designed to have sex. We want to. Whenever you're connected with somebody and you're really hitting it off, sorry, I just had like a hiccup, and you really love them and care for them, it's totally okay that you feel like your body is ready. But then I think that should spark a conversation then in your relationship where if you feel like, okay, I'm ready to have sex with this person, then maybe the conversation should match that. You should be having emotional conversations, future talks. Hey, if we're ready to have sex right now, are you ready for marriage? Are you ready for something like that? And I don't think our age should stop us from those conversations, because I know a lot of really good people who got married at a young age, but I also think that at a young age you should really take consideration of, am I really ready to sacrifice things for this person? Because you will have to sacrifice a lot if you're committed to someone at a young age. You're going to have to probably sacrifice what college looks like or graduation, where am I going? So you do have to consider probably a lot more than if you're in your late 20s or early 30s, and it probably won't be as easy. But I don't think you should beat yourself up or feel bad if you're ready to have sex with your partner. If you're in love with them and you've been with them for a while and it's healthy and it's going good, then that's a natural thing that you should be feeling. But then it's, what do you do after that that makes the difference? And we're called to be faithful to God and what He's told us to do. So it's taking those emotions, those feelings, those hormones that are naturally coming up, and you're like, okay, what do I do with these? And then that's where you walk with God faithfully and you do the next right step. So I think it's really normal to feel that way, and I don't think that should be something you're scared of, but rather confront it in a way that's faithful to God.
So let's say that you have opened your temple up to your significant other. What if you get pregnant or get someone else pregnant? How do you deal with this?
I'm assuming this means like out of the context of marriage. I mean, I think that's when, that's one of the reasons why I think saving sex for the context of marriage is an important thing. One of the results of sex can be a child. And the best place for a child is in the context of marriage. And that shows kind of God's goodness and his plan for us, and wanting to have kids grow up in families. I think I really hesitate on giving advice with this, because I think just to give a blanket statement of like you should get married is a very dangerous one. I do think that the life of the child is a very important life and needs to be preserved and protected. I think if something like that were to happen, it would be like a one-on-one conversation with trusted adults who are going to walk you through that. Just to give a blanket statement and say, put a ring on the finger, get married as soon as possible, and start a family would be kind of like maybe not the best case in every situation. But I would say what you need to do is find a trusted adult, both of you. You both need to get counsel. You need to work together, and both with maybe your own counselors as well, in addition to trusted adults that you can walk through that, and consider how are you going to provide for the life of this child, whether it is adoption or something else.
Yeah, I know I have a unique perspective of my parents. My mom got pregnant at 16, and they got married while in high school. They're still married today. That is a very rare, extremely rare story. I don't think I've heard any other people with that similar experience. So it is an option, but I've also met other people where it wasn't a good thing to marry that person. That person was abusive or toxic, or just weren't really prepared to be a parent, and they weren't going to step up for that, and then it was not the right choice. But I think it's so unique, like what Jenna was saying, with each case, so there's not really like this blanket like statement or answer to it, but it's what's the next right step that's faithful to God. And it's super intimidating, but I think that there's no shame in thinking of adoption or kinship care, or maybe you're thinking marriage or not, or maybe let's date and let's continue and see if we're ready for marriage, and let's have counseling and talk to other people, authority figures in our life. And I think it's finding your community and then deciding what's the next right step that's faithful to God for you and whoever you're with.
I'm going to take a little bit of a side tangent, but I agree with everything they said. When I was in your seats, that fear of getting someone pregnant was the number one reason why I didn't have sex. Like, it wasn't out of obedience to God, which is bad. This is a very bad thing. Yeah, I was totally fearful of that, but no one talked about it. We didn't discuss that. It was like, well, it could happen, and it was really hard. And then I watched several friends later on do that outside of the context of marriage, and it was brutal for them. But to surround yourself with a team, if that is the case, surround yourself with a team of people that will help you, whether it be family members, whether it be people in this room, usually leaders or adults that are, people a little further along in life. But the whole reason for having sex, not having sex, should not be out of like fear. I don't want to get somebody pregnant. That's a beautiful little life, like you said, Jenna, but they should be brought into this world in the context of marriage, and that's what we see in the Bible.
So sticking on the topic of sex, why is it so bad to have sex so young if you're just going to do it when you're married? Like, why does it feel so bad to have thoughts about sex if it's something that's going to happen anyway?
Sex isn't bad, so let's clear that up. It's a good gift from the Lord. And so I think that's important to say. Like, it's not a bad thing. God designed us to long for intimacy, and one of the ways that intimacy can be fulfilled is with sex. I think one of the reasons why I would encourage you to wait for marriage is because the level of intimacy that sex provides is best experienced in the context of a marriage where you are equally committed for life. And so just to say that sex is bad would be a total lie. It is a good gift from the Father. So, yeah.
I would say, this is going to sound a little weird. Sex is not, it's not that great, guys. Like, we build it up so much in our minds, especially when we're young, and we put all these expectations and it's the glue that helps hold a marriage together. That's what it's designed for. It is a gift from God. But honestly, if you go and you end up having sex with somebody, you're going to be looking for the next thing, right? And we do this with so many aspects of our lives. Oh, well, we want to just get to college, right? Or we want to just graduate and we want to buy our first house or do whatever it is. We're always looking for the next thing. And honestly, I think sex kind of falls in there. It is not the end-all, be-all, but it does have a drastic effect on your life if it's taken outside of the context of marriage. Could be really good, could be devastating, just depends on where it's allotted in your life.
No, I'm trying to think of the question again. You read the question again?
I can. Why is it so bad to have sex so young if you're just going to do it when you're married? Like, why does it feel so bad to have thoughts about sex if it's something that's going to happen anyway? And I'll add this one caveat. It's the next question under that Jenny, you kind of answered in your response already, but just an additional thing is, if God designed sex, why do we have to wait to get married to do it? So.
Oh, yeah, good questions. I think it is something that the level of intimacy, as I think both of you mentioned, is significant enough where, like, I'm showing you everything I have, literally. This is me, and nothing is hiding me from you, and that's significant, right? And to do that to multiple people, I think I don't have a lot of experiences because I've been married for 15 years, but that level of intimacy wears down to where, like, hey, I've had sex with this person and this person, this person, these 15 people, so it's not something that's nearly as special. I think too that in the Bible, God just kind of the picture of marriage is between Christ and the church, right? And that is, for me, that's one of the things why I view Christian marriage so highly, is because of how God says, hey, this is Christ and the bride, the church. And those things, that relationship is so significant and so intimate and so connected that it should be exalted highly. And it should be something that it's not Christ and this person, it's Christ and his church. That's the connection of marriage. That's the picture of marriage that we see. And that's, one man will clean to one woman and they will become one flesh. That physically happens. And if you do that with 10, 12 people, that connection and intimacy is I'm not going to say destroyed. It's not like you can never come back from that. But it's lessened for sure.
Just like one more thing to add, I think, like, when you look at the language that Scripture uses when it talks about sexual relationships, oftentimes it says, like, and so knew his wife. Like, that speaks to a level of deep intimacy, in that, like, this is not just a physical thing. This is a deep knowing of somebody. But similar language is used in the way that God knows us. And so sexuality is a mirror of God's covenant relationship with us. And so, when you think of it that way, and the level of intimacy that you have with that person, it's not something to just jump into. It is something that is beautiful and given to us by the Lord, and it is mirrored in our relationship with Him. And so I think that's something just to remember as well. It's our covenant relationship. It's a covenant relationship with your spouse, that in a way it mirrors our covenant relationship with the Lord.
John Mark Comer says this about sex. He says something powerful happens in sex. Two humans become echad. They become one. They know each other, and this action cannot be undone. It's irreversible. And to God, the only relationship strong enough to hold that kind of untamed, fierce power is marriage. That's the only container that can handle the nuclear force we call sex. I thought that was just like a well-worded statement. So, anybody else? All right. Back to relationships. How do you know when or if you should break up? And breakup was like in all caps, just for, I don't know. I mean, how do you know if or when you should break up? How do you break up with someone in a Christ-like way?
I feel like if you're already questioning it, and it's in all caps, then I think that might be a little bit of a red flag if you're thinking it. I think that if any boundaries are being crossed, or if there are really big moral or spiritual differences between the two of you, I feel like that might be also a reason to like, okay, this might not be it. But if you are having a disagreement that is small, it is not life-shattering, or it is just difficult, or you are bored, that is not a reason to break up with someone. If you're continually bored, then maybe, okay, you're not getting along. But if you are just having a rough week, that is definitely not a reason to break up with someone. And doing it in a Christ-like way, I don't know. Okay, so I went to a Bible college, and a lot of my friends who went through a breakup, people really tried to make a breakup spiritual, like so much so that it was like really hard to watch, and it was actually more hurtful because they're like, well, I was praying, and he said that you were the worst person ever for me, so we're just going to end it. Like, people would bring God, and they would put their maybe poor decisions on God. And your indecisiveness or not readiness for a relationship, they were like, oh, but it's God, so it's okay, so I can just bail. And I think that we have to be careful of how we approach a breakup. And I don't think over-spiritualize it. I think that if it's mutual and you're like, yeah, this isn't working, or they're not being really respectful to you, or it's not healthy, or it's toxic or abusive, then I think keeping it simple, clear, and respectful is the easiest way to go of, hey, I don't think this is working. I respect you as a person, and by respecting you, I'm not doing this anymore. And I think that not over-spiritualizing it, because I've seen that used in really bad ways in my experience.
Why are you dating them in the first place? That'd be the question I'd ask myself, is like, what am I doing here, right? I was raised and still do at this point, like, I date with the intention to marry. So if I'm not thinking about marriage futuristically, I'm wasting their time, I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting energy, probably a lot of money. Like, it just depends. Like, but ask yourself, why am I dating this person? And then I would second everything Ainsley said. Do it graciously. Do it quickly. Don't drag it out. Don't allow for this drama. Don't get a bunch of other people involved. Just say it how it needs to be, kindly, and then go your separate ways.
And I think clarity is important there too. Like, say it graciously, but also firmly, right? This is a breakup, not a like, we'll kind of see what happens, but like, yes, right.
Yeah, and I think too, being specific, like, here's the reasons why, and not just, oh, we're going apart, it's not working out. It's because you did X, Y, Z, or said this thing that I did not like, or we have none of the same values, whatever it may be. You know, be honest with the persons that they'll know. It won't be kind of lead them, oh, well, maybe if I fix this. No, it's never going to happen. You're never, ever getting back together. So.
All right, before you ask your question, remember it. If you need to write it down, write it down. We're going to invite our other panelists up. Jason, Sarah, Faith, yes. If you guys would, here you go. We started off saying what our name was and our relationship status and kind of like family-ish. Age too. Tom, you didn't say your age.
I did. I
did you?
36. 36.
Oh, did you want another water?
30.
You don't have to say your age, but Tom was Bryson's small group leader when he was in high school. So, he kind of age dropped for him already. So, but if you would, Jason, we'll start with you and work our way back this way. If you would share your name and your relationship status. And if you have any like children or anything like that, something,
Not my relationship status with you, with my family.
You could.
Okay.
Yeah. If this is the right place for that. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
My name is Jason. I am married to Elisa. We've been married for almost 24 years. Yeah. And we have 8 kids, and 3 of them are here, right?
They're supposed to be, at least.
Supposed to be. And what else was there? Was that it?
That was good. Yep. Yeah.
Okay, Ella, Lola, Jalen. Those are my kids here. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I'm Sarah, and I'm married to Steven. We'll be coming up on 17 years, and we have 3 kids. One is going to be in this room next year. Yeah, it's coming. But we have 13. She's 13 and 9 and 3.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so my name is Faith, and I am not married, and I do not have children, and I'm 47.
I'm 46.
Oh, sorry, I'm 37.
Not sure why this one doesn't work. All right, so our next question. We've kind of worked through temptation and some of those questions. This one's kind of going back there a little bit. But if we are supposed to control our thoughts, how do I do that? Oh, wait, no, sorry, forget that question. Bella, what's your question? So you do want to get back together.
Never, ever, ever,
Oh,
ever.
so the question was, if you didn't hear it, how do you feel about breaks in a relationship? Like we were on a break, and what if you want to get back together?
I think it depends. I mean, is this a mutual thing of like, we're going to take some time apart for this specific purpose? Here's the goal. Here's when we're going to check in. I mean, I think there needs to be some healthy boundaries, or somebody could potentially get hurt in that situation. But I wouldn't say that like a break is never appropriate. I think there are times where separation for a particular purpose could be wise.
Yeah, I'd say too, if it's a person that does value, respect you, and has similar values and goals, I don't see why not getting back with them. I mean, I don't think that's going to hurt anything, unless I'm wrong.
I don't know which questions have been answered already before I came. So this might overlap with a different question, but I think it can be useful to think through, like, why did you want to break and why are you getting back together? Because I feel like sometimes you just want to get back together to be with a person and not because that is your person. So I think like recognizing that, and I think if that's not true, that's a different, there's, I think, good allowance for it. But I do think there's good thinking and processing and kind of talking through with other people that can happen that can help you realize, like, oh, I'm more attracted to being in a relationship than I am being with this person. And just recognizing, okay, if I'm on a break and I'm struggling, I might just be struggling because I'm grieving the loss of a relationship, not because I'm grieving the loss of that person. So anyway.
I particularly am usually not a big fan of breaks, because if your relationship can't get through that situation, then maybe it's not a good relationship. Now, I know that is not every single, case, but most of any time my friends are saying we're on a break, this or that, it's like, well, we just weren't communicating well, or we just weren't, vibing. And you're like, okay, well, is a break really going to fix that? No, because if you're not communicating well or you're not feeling it, then you need to work on communicating, and that requires being in a relationship with the person. So I think also the intention of the break too, because if you're just having a break so you can text other people or feel no restrictions of a relationship, then I think that you're not ready to be in a relationship, and neither is that person, and then it's not a break, it's a breakup. So I think that in very rare cases, a break is okay, but it is very rare, and especially in high school, it's not that deep, and it's either a breakup or you learn how to work through it. That's my personal opinion, just from what I've heard, though. And then with getting back together, you know, my mom always told, I know this is like popular too, but like the 3-month rule, after you break up with someone, after 3 months, they always come back, or like one of them like boomerangs back. Like, that was always a thing. Like, I don't know if you guys relate to that, but I always know, like, you know, oh, at 3 months after the breakup, one of you is gonna come back. And I think that examine, I know you're laughing, you're like, hey, I'm experiencing it. But so we've all been there, but I think that it's where is that person at, and where are you at, and did you actually give yourselves enough time to grow after that breakup, because there's a reason why it didn't work out. So I think that there has to be a really honest conversation why, and I like what Faith had to say about like how she said, oh my gosh, I just had a complete.
Just about missing being in a relationship
Yes,
rather than
yes.
the person.
I didn't know how to word that because you just did it too good. It was like, yeah, exactly what she said too. Yeah.
So let's say you took the break and you didn't get back together. You broke up, as the previous question asked. How do you heal from a breakup? Like, what might that look like? It is, yeah. So I'll ask it specifically if you've been hurt in a relationship or just broke up. It could be regarding dating, engagement, or marriage. What does the healing process look like? How do you heal?
I think you do it in community. I think one of the dangers of a breakup is you've now lost a significant relationship in your life, and you've lost a significant source of intimacy. And so to do it in community with other people where you can be real and vulnerable and also experience intimacy in different ways, I think is very, very helpful. You might also need a counselor to walk through that with you, depending on what type of breakup we're talking about, and somebody just to walk you through and help you to process that loss, and to help you just begin to face the reality of what life without that relationship is going to look like and how that changes. But I think the importance of having good friends to walk that along with you cannot be stated enough. Just having those friends that you can rely on and who can love on you, and just sit with you in that grief is really important.
I think you have to mourn the loss, and then we'll get to your question. You definitely have to mourn the loss of what was and what could have been. Even in a simple breakup, right? We have these ideals of where God may be taking you together, and that's great. You have to sit in that. You have to sit in the suck for a little bit, and then process it. Get a counselor. Have great friends. I had two amazing men that we met upstairs when I went to youth group here, but that walked through my divorce with me, and they got down and prayed with me, right? And we spent time in the Word. What does the Word say about it? And where are all these emotions? I can't assimilate them. And so sit down, journal, write these things out, flush it out completely, and then turn to someone else who's probably been through it and has a little bit more wisdom. So that was my thoughts. What was your question? Can we?
I would just say before we get to that question, Nolan, make sure you remember it. I think it. And any other responses to this one?
One thing I'd like to add that's maybe a precursor to this question is pay attention, if you can, to trying to not sow seeds of that my identity is my relationship with this other person, because that's going to make it so much harder. And also, and this is a balancing act, and I know for you guys especially it's a balancing act when it comes to your schedules, because from what I understand of a lot of people, there's of kind of kids your age. Like, they're very busy and involved in a lot of things. And so it makes it hard to fit everything in. But I would say if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you should still have your other friends. And maybe you can't do it all equally, and that's okay, but just staying grounded in being like a human being outside of the relationship. And then also the protection that provides for, like, when you say to my girlfriend or say to my guy friends, like, they did this or they played this mind game, that they're like, like, that's what you want right now, you know? But I do think that there's a protective factor in having continuing on with those deeper relationships, and also being intentional about, like, I'm not going to build. I know it feels like it would make sense to build your world around someone you feel so deeply in love with. At the same time, that's not particularly safe almost ever in your whole life. So.
Along the lines of needing to feel the feelings, also conversely, don't just put Band-Aids on it. Because, I mean, we all know what a rebound is, right? Like, we've all heard of this. This is a pattern for a reason. We are tempted to just get out. We don't want to feel that. We are so tempted to just not feel the pain, to just get out as fast as we can. Just make it, whatever we have to do to make it stop. But we have to feel those feelings. We have to allow ourselves the full process, because we also know what the pattern of outcome for a rebound relationship is too. It's not great. And now we're compounding the hurt. So it is imperative that you do that, because there are other things that might happen otherwise.
I was wondering how do you establish good and healthy boundaries? How do you build boundaries?
So in case you didn't hear it, how do you establish good and healthy boundaries? How do you establish them? How do you keep them? And I'm assuming you mean in a dating relationship, right? Okay.
Two ways, 2 or 3 ways, I think. Your own kind of biblical study, relationship with God, talking to Him regularly, but also you need to have in-depth conversation with your partner, whoever that is. And if they don't have the similar boundaries, or that they're continuing to try to cross them, that's when you need to draw the line. That's where maybe a breakup is in place. But instead of just assuming this person feels, they go to church, they probably feel the same way as I do. You need to have a conversation with them. This is what I'm not going to do, and here's why. This is what we should. Here's some places we shouldn't go, and here's why. And holding each other accountable, but then also sharing with another close friend, I think, so that they can hold you accountable too. So not just your boyfriend or girlfriend, but a close friend, or if you're close with your parents, that, something like that as well, so that they can be not in your relationship, but they can be someone who's holding you accountable. Hey, how are you doing with that? Is that getting a temptation that's getting too close sometimes? But without conversation and without coming to an agreement on things, it's going to be easy to keep pushing those things farther and farther.
A real quick answer is there's a book called Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. It's an excellent book. There's another one he wrote, Beyond Boundaries, and then I think there's even one for teenagers. Boundaries in Dating. There's a couple in the series, but Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. Townsend, they're excellent resources. A lot of scripture tossed in there. That's not just going to be the cop-out. You have to sit down and figure out what your standards are, what you know scripture to tell you your standards are. But it's a good book. I love that book.
So a few other things I think to consider, and this may look a little bit different for girls and guys. One, I think this is overall like a general, having set the stage with some, like a conversation where you are direct about what you want and don't want, and all of that. Then adding to that, I think the like preventative actions. I feel like there are ways you can get in a situation like we were alone and it was this and it was this and then it just happened and you're like, okay, like how many steps were there up until it just happened that you could have been attentive to? Like for example, one of my friends, right before they got married, they realized like we cannot watch a movie together laying down. We cannot do anything together laying down. It is unsafe for us. Like it is. And so then they kind of set those, and I think you have to be careful to not be like crazily rigid, but I think there are ways that you can set yourself up for success by thinking through and anticipating, similar to how you would do in like a sports game where you're like, I want to win, and so this is how it might play out, and this is this person's strength, this is this person's weakness, and that kind of thing. So I think that's one of the things. And I think it's also important to think through emotional boundaries. A lot of times, ladies, you're going to be, the more you've shared emotionally and feel connected in that way, the more open you're going to feel sexually. And that is what it is, and so to be aware of it. And I've definitely heard of people talking about, like, he seemed nice and safe, so 7 minutes into our relationship, I told him about the worst thing that ever happened to me, or this, like, deep trauma or something like that. And then that's going to lead you to feel connected in a way that the other person hasn't proven themselves trustworthy for, but it's also going to open the door for you to feel like it makes sense to have like a more sexual relationship, or for there to be more intimacy. And so just being attentive to that being, I think, part of how God made us to be, and so that there are strengths and weaknesses within that.
So I'm going to couple that with the other question asked about dating. So Annie's question, how do I know when I'm ready for a romantic relationship? And then, is there a point to dating in high school? Like, how do I know if I'm ready, and is there even a point? Are kind of the two ends of that question. And the one about high school, it just said, like, statistically, it's not going to work out. So, like, why even try?
It won't probably. All this, and I don't know if Ben will be mad at me, but I'm like, just date people in high school. Not like a ton of people, but I think it's okay to go out with people and go on dates and pursue a relationship. And if you're smart about it and you have your boundaries and you're not doing physical things because it's fun, just get to know people really well. And if this doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I don't think we have to have, I need to find that one person that I'm going to date so that I can marry them. I think it's putting a lot of pressure on yourself, on that person, on the relationship. And maybe you don't want to have, super specific labels. This is my boyfriend, or this is someone that I'm hanging out with, and kind of seeing where the relationship heads. I think that's okay. I think if you go into it thinking maybe this is the person I'm going to marry from day one, I think that puts a lot of pressure on yourself and on the other person. That being said, you be wise with who you're pursuing that kind of relationship with, not just any, but someone that you know is similar values and morals as you and all those things. If you're uncomfortable, if you're wondering, when will I be ready? I just don't. Just wait a little longer. That's fine. You don't have to date someone who's 17 or 18 or maybe you're in college. You can wait a little while until you feel comfortable. I don't think I have like a specific, when this happens, then you'll know this is the person you should date. But maybe somebody else does.
I would say just like a red flag that maybe you're not ready to date is if you want to date because you like feel like you need somebody in order to feel secure in some way. Or if it's like, I feel like I need a relationship right now, or I so badly want a relationship right now. I think it's okay to long for a relationship, or think like it would be really, like someday I would love to be in a relationship. But I think there's an importance to being content and where the Lord has you, and being content by yourself, knowing who you are for yourself. And so if you're feeling like your desire to be in a relationship is maybe rooted in some insecurity or something, I think there would be wisdom in slowing that down and waiting.
I think there's also it's important to consider that we're all kind of wired differently, and some of us like to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend all the time. I mean, it's just, that's how we're wired, and then some of us don't have one all through high school. And one of the ways that we can encourage one another is maybe not look at the person on the other side and be like, why do they always have to have a boyfriend? Or why don't you ever have a girlfriend? Whatever it might be. And just recognize that some of us are wired differently. I know for Elisa and I always had a girlfriend in high school. Like, it just seemed like it was a constant. And I think it was the same for Elisa, which is kind of funny because most of our kids are not like that. So they're all pretty, on the other side of it. But I think it's important to like come alongside our friends that maybe are on the other side of that, and just maybe walk with them in that. And when we see a friend who's maybe a little in too deep in a relationship, and you're the one who's always single, walk with them, but not be judgmental in that way, and vice versa. Like, why don't you ever have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and making them feel bad? Because honestly, there's benefits in having someone walking with you in a relationship, and then there's benefits of not being caught up in it. So just trying to encourage one another wherever they land on that.
And also, I would say keep in mind that this is a little bit mean, but I'm going to say it anyway. Your high school might not provide you with the most quality pool of people that you might meet in your whole life. So yeah. So anyway, keep that in mind, that like if you're like looking around and you're like, I can't like anyone here, it might be because you have like good taste or something, and so that it doesn't necessarily say anything about you if you're not dating in high school. Like that doesn't have to mean anything long term. All of us in this room are the oldest we've ever been, right? And so like it feels like, oh my gosh, I need this right now, and it might feel that way, but it's not. Like when you look back at this time, you're not going to be like, oh, I wish I dated so much more, like you're really not. I
don't
promise.
think, has anyone ever thought that they wish they would have dated a lot more in high school?
No, but I think it's a thing where we like.
I mean, in high school, you would maybe want to date more. Right. But like looking back, I don't think, man, I wish I would have had more girlfriends.
That's what
Well,
I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, exactly. Yeah.
I do think we have some structure in our lives that sort of makes us feel like there is a point of readiness. Like, you're 16, now you get your license and you're ready to drive. You're 18, now you're able to vote. We have certain structures in our lives that might make us feel like this is the point where I am ready to date. And even spiritually, that's not really the case. There's not really milestones that you can point to specifically. It's more about discernment and wisdom. So if you're waiting for that point, I really love what Tom said about, like, if you're uncomfortable, then you wait. That's okay. But it's more about self-awareness and discernment than it is about this is the point in my life when I'm ready.
And even if you're ready, does not mean that you have to date. Like, there might just not be that option available, and that's okay too. It's okay to feel like I would be ready if there was a person.
Back. Hand up. Man in blue shirt.
Yes, student in the back. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, question for you guys. Paul talks about 1 Corinthians 7, marry your single, right? So, something to be encouraged for these students just a reminder, not so question, singleness is a blessing. Some people are designed to be single. Paul encourages you to have a desire to burn with passion. He encourages you to find someone to be together with. So how would you encourage
So if we can step into that with another question that was submitted that just kind of references the church's idolization of marriage and family. So that's not a question, more so just a statement to toss out. And what is your response?
It's true.
Yeah, so actually our small group just went through 1 Corinthians, and he does talk about, hey, it's better to remain single. He says, if I were, he said something, I wish that all of you could remain single as I am. Because, he says, then you could work for the Lord. So it's not like, then you'll be happier. He's like, you have so much more time to work for the Lord if you're single, which is true. But yeah, the church does almost fetishize marriage. Yeah, too much. Marriage is great. I love being married. But not everyone's married, and that's okay. And there's a lot of people that can be doing ministry, or ministry can involve them, and they're not being brought in, I guess. So, yeah, being single is great. Being married is great. I don't think one is better than the other, if that makes sense.
I think this kind of relates to what I was saying before, but it's even more scripturally probably understood in what you guys are talking about with Paul and Corinthians, is that recognizing that some people are going to be married and some people are going to be single, but the point in both of those relationships, or both of those ways of life, is that you are giving of yourself for the Lord. So even whether it's single, as Tom, you were saying, Paul wishes that they all could remain single like he is. It's a dying to oneself for the sake of living for the Lord. And that's how a marriage relationship should be. So in my marriage relationship, when I am at my best, I am dying to myself. So either way, it is a way how we live, whether it's single or married or dating. I mean, think about it, even with dating. If you can have that mindset of how can I die to myself, some of these questions about what kind of boundaries should I cross, they shouldn't even come up sometimes. If I am dying to myself and my own desires, my own selfish needs or wants or whatever, it's not about like what can I get from that other person. And so in singleness or in married life or even in dating, if we're able to die to ourselves and take our selfishness out of the equation, that's going to better benefit the relationships that we're in.
I know, I just thought of whenever Jenna taught and she was talking about how marriage isn't the finish line. When we think about our lives, our sexuality, our identity, marriage is not the finish line. Singleness is not the finish line either. And I think whenever Paul's talking about that as, singleness being a gift, it's not saying it's better or worse. It's saying it's not, our relationship status is not our motivation for what we're doing in our life or our main passion or should be our finish line, our goal. Our goal should be to be like Christ, to follow him, to be faithful to what he's put in front of us. And if that is singleness, then be faithful to it. If it is dating, then be faithful to it. If it's marriage, then be faithful to it. And I think that, again, our finish line, our goal, our ultimate achievement, and I like what you had to say, is it should be how can I respect others? How can I be self-sacrificing and loving towards my community, and then how can I be faithful to what God's put in front of me? And that should be our ultimate goal, not our relationship status.
All right. Let's see. You want a hard one? Okay, thank you for saying that, because I was debating whether or not to give you this one, because this one is also less of a question and more of a statement to respond to. All right, so this is about same-sex attraction. So more of a statement than a question, but it feels so unfair for God to allow people to be same-sex attracted, and then because of his rules, them not be allowed to ever experience marriage or sex. So again, it's not so much a question as it is a statement, but how would you respond to somebody who is saying that or feeling that way?
I probably would start by saying that seems true, that's hard. I think in general, one of the places I found a little bit comfort around the area is he didn't say you can't have any intimate relationships. You have to live on an island alone, and no one will ever love you, and you will never love anyone else, right? He doesn't forbid that. He says, like, you can't do sexual acts with the person that's the same gender as you, right? And so I feel like part of what's drawn or ways that I've been comforted in thinking that's a hard teaching, and I believe it because the Bible says it, but it's hard and it feels sad to me, right? Is that right now I'm called to the exact same thing, and I have been for like a bunch of decades now. So like essentially, because of being single, right? I'm not supposed to be having sexual interactions with anyone. Does that mean I don't have any intimate relationships and I'm alone on an island and never loved or being loved? No, it doesn't. So I think that's one of the things that I feel like is while it's hard and while it's an ask, and God like drawing a line in the sand, there are a lot of other lines he's drawn in the sand. It seems like predominantly this room is made up of people that according to God's standard of intimate relationships, shouldn't be having sexual relationships with any gender because they're unmarried, and that's part of his goodness and protection of us. And I don't understand it super well, but I feel like God is good, and so we look at him through the lens of goodness, and if he sets a rule for us, it's a good rule, even if it feels like it stings.
Yeah, I'd say too, God knows what's best for us, even if it doesn't feel like it's best for us at the moment. And in the long run, eternality, his ways are so much higher, his thoughts are so much higher, all those things. Also practically, so there's a Center for Faith and Practice run by Preston Sprinkle, has a lot of good resources on this. There's a book called Spiritual Friendship by Wesley Hill. This is exactly what he said. I'm a man that has intimate needs, but that doesn't mean they have to be sexual intimate needs. I can have intimacy with male friends. I can have intimacy with female friends. And it's about opening your homes to Christians who are same-sex attracted and say, hey, we're going to have a spiritual friendship with you, and you're part of our family now. We're not having sex with that person, obviously. But great book. Yes, a lot of things seem unfair at times if you read through the Bible, but if you read through seeing the whole redemptive story, there's a lot of things that are given to us that are unfair as well. So our sense of fairness, it's not fair that Christ died for us at all. It's not fair that he accepted me as sinner for whatever reason. It's not fair that he decided to send his son for us. So our sense of fairness, my sense of fairness is probably different than her sense of fairness. So who's to say we should go off of my standard of fairness or goodness, which might be different than Bryson's or Faith. So if God's, we have to trust that it's good and it's for our best.
The only thing I would just add is I think this is where like the church can get it wrong in elevating marriage. I think marriage is wonderful. It is good. But when we don't make room for others in our families, then I think we get it wrong. And I think part of the idea of being a church family is we open up our homes to others. We do life with each other. And just as a single person, especially in times when my kids are gone, one of the things that I appreciate most is when I can call a friend and be like, I need family right now. I need a place to go. And they welcome me into their home, and that's a need. And so just be thinking about that, like how can we create families and homes where we live with doors that are open to those who might need a family and might need that home for a time. And I think that it works as well for those who are same-sex attracted. So it is a friend who's attracted to you. Okay. I don't have any answer. I was just clarifying.
I would have to say approach it if they openly said they're attracted to you and they confessed that. I think setting the same boundaries as if a guy that you didn't like came up to you and said, hey, I like you and I'm into you, and you go, oh no, and you were good friends with them, and then they said, hey. So I think that treating it that way and not like isolating them or making them feel totally terrible for that, but also creating boundaries and saying, hey, this isn't something that I believe in or that I'm into, or I'm not into girls, and then create those boundaries in your friendship out of respect for them so they don't get mixed signals from you, as you would if a guy would come up to you. I feel like that is the best way to do it without hurting their feelings and still respecting them as people and with feelings and emotions.
Or, sorry, right before you ask, any other responses to that?
Yeah, I just remember you can't control their response. So if they break off that friendship, or whatever, because it's awkward for them, I mean, you do what you can, but you're not the one pushing them away. If they turn and go, then they turn and go.
All right, sorry.
So first of all, I want to point us back to the Preston Sprinkle resources because there's a lot of good in there. But I also have a transgender person in my family, my extended family, and one thing I can tell you is they want to be treated like a human. They want to be treated with dignity and with respect. And so having them for Thanksgiving and not making that the headline that they're at dinner with everybody else is part of it. Because we're not making a headline that anybody else is at the table. This is our table, and this is where we commune together. And so there's part of it that, like, that doesn't even have to be the thing that you talk about that day. That can just be like, my friend is here today, my cousin is here today, whatever you would normally do that you share. Like, are we having a meal together? Are we going to a movie together? Whatever that activity is, like, that doesn't have to be the headline of that day because that's another human that you're relating to. That's another human that you're spending time with. Does that make sense?
I think that there's also this, somehow we got it in our minds that as Christians we have this responsibility to control people's behaviors. And that is just not something that we should be about. So whether you or control people's choices. Whether you are, let's say, you even have affirming position, but you still struggle with, it being a family member that it's just confusing for you or whatever. Or whether you're on the side where this is just outright sin, they should not be doing anything that they're doing, and I just feel wrong being around them. There is a kind of love that God calls us to that is revolutionary, in that God loves us and calls us to love in such a way that it covers a multitude of sins. So if you're with this understanding that someone who's living in a homosexual relationship, or someone who's transgender or whatever, our responsibility is not to fix. Our responsibility is not to change that person. Our approach should first be love and treating them as Jesus would treat us. And I think Sarah brings up a really good point. Like, we don't draw attention to anyone else's issues at the table, right? But sometimes we can highlight, and this is what we do in the church, we'll highlight certain things that are hot topics. The topic of homosexuality comes up 7 times in the scriptures. And Jesus talks about money more than anything else. But I bet at Thanksgiving, the table you describe, you're not feeling really uncomfortable with the uncle that's like making so much money they don't know what to do with. But we tend to pick apart certain sins and certain topics, and that shouldn't be our role is not to grade sins and hold, pass out report cards in our relationships. That's just not what God calls us to do. And so our responsibility should look different, and the people that are around us, they should see that in us.
Yeah, and I feel that we assume that people in the LGBTQ plus community want to always talk about their sexuality or always make a point. And if you recognize and kind of pay attention and stop talking on your end, you'd realize that it's just out of defense because we keep talking back. I worked at a domestic violence shelter, and every single one of my coworkers were part of that community. I worked with 2 transgender individuals, pansexual, asexual, bisexual, all of it. And I was the only straight person on my team. I was in the minority. And I quickly realized they never talked about their sexuality. They never talked about, they just said, oh yeah, I went on a date last weekend. Oh, how'd it go? Good, yeah, cool. All right, that's it. And I didn't make a point to try to address it, and they didn't make a point of trying to address it. And I worked there for 2 years, and I am still really close friends with them. They know I'm a Christian, they know I go to church, but we didn't even talk about that because they're my coworkers. Why would I be talking about their sex life to them? And I think we'd realize there's a very few amount of people in our lives that we should be talking about our sexual identity with, and we don't have the right to speak into other people's sex lives, and they don't have a right to speak into ours. And even some family members, my great aunt, I'm not talking about her sex life. I'm not at Thanksgiving dinner, but if someone has a different one, we somehow think we have the right to speak into it. So no matter where you land on affirming or not, I think that the first conversation is, do I really have a right to speak into that part of that person's life? And 99% of the time it's a no. And then you don't even have to worry about it because you're just focused on loving that person, connecting with them, communicating, checking in on them, and valuing them as a person. And I think if we focus on that first, there's a lot less conflict we would come into if we just started with that.
Just to add on to what you guys were saying, I think a very important distinction in this conversation, or any conversation talking about sin, is are they a Christian or are they not a Christian? Because a lot of times the Christian community at large can try to hold non-Christians to a Christian ethic. And that's not fair to them, because the only reason we have that ethic is because we have God living inside of us. And so I think in the Bible, we are called to hold fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, hold them accountable, talk to them lovingly. If you see a fellow brother or sister in Christ drifting or maybe not upholding biblical truth, that might fall into that 1% that Ainsley was talking about, that you could address some issue with someone. But 99% of the time, they're going to be someone you don't have a relationship with, one, or two, they're not a Christian. And our mission in the Bible, what we are commanded to do to non-Christians, is to share the gospel, which means good news. And good news is not, you're failing this way, this way, this way, this way. It doesn't mean we don't need to speak truth to them. If we're asked, we should stand firm in our beliefs and not be shy to share those with people. But it's evangelism, right? We should share good news with people who aren't Christian, not bad news, right? So.
And similarly, going off of that is just the sense of we attempt to follow God's law because he's inside of us and the Holy Spirit empowers us, but also because of who he is to us, right? And so that sense of, before God gave the 10 Commandments, he says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, right? So he's like, I rescued you from where you were at to bring you to this other place. And so here are some rules I need to set for you. But like that is the beauty of that context, that it's not some angry principal or scary person, but it's someone who took all of the cost to give us a relationship that is unlosable, kind of, and that there's never a better gift we'll get, you know? And that is good news and different than saying, like, what are the 7 ways you sinned yesterday? Let's talk about it. And, you know, right.
That was a serious question, Tom. We want to hear the answer.
There's more than 7.
All right, it is 8:15 right now. So historically, we have split into guys and girls. We have obviously not yet tonight. Do you want to? Or do you want to stay here and keep going as we are going?
Are you asking the panel or are you asking them?
I'm just tossing it out. Yes.
Split, that looks
Yes. Looks like split.
like. Men don't care that the ladies want to split.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like something. All right. So girls, you're going to go up to the venue. And yes, we will see you later. Thanks for hanging out.